I wanted to, in these annual presentations, are an attempt to try to summarize some of the main events or activities that have gone on in our community related to environmental protection. And this year, what I was thinking of doing was, instead of going through all the activities, that I would instead focus on what I consider to be just about the most pressing environmentally related issue on the island in terms of things that we can do something about. And that is both the promotion of green manufacturing, but even more important, what we're going to do with this high-quality manufacturing facility that we have in K2. And so after I go through some of the highlights of environmentally related activities on the island, that I want to talk about, sort of outline some thoughts on how we might go about promoting green manufacturing on the island, with the K2 facility really as the centerpiece, but not the exclusive site for this. The K2 would be kind of the part of the focus of a much larger sphere of activities, and I'll be talking about those today. See if I get this right. Okay. So I want to start out once again by defining sustainability. I do this every year because there still seems to be discussion about what this actually means. So I'll just present that once again as part of the charter document, founding charter for the Sustainable Practices Committee. Then I'll go through what I'm calling an eco update, which is a summary of all the myriad activities that are going on the island. And every time I put these things together, I'm shocked at how much is going on. And so, unfortunately, it's still a big chunk of this presentation. And then talking about the proposal for expanding green industry on Vashon. And then an appeal for not only for people's questions and ideas, but also for people to step forward and help us figure out what we want to do regarding the K2 facility. So, what do we mean by sustainability? Again, according to the founding charter for the Sustainable Practices Committee, a sustainable way of life is one that meets the current needs of all the Earth's inhabitants without compromising the ability of any of those in the future to meet their own. What I think I want to do for this presentation, if there are things that I say that are not clear, please feel free to stop me. But there's a lot of, as you can tell, there's a lot of material that I want to go through. So if something is not clear, feel free to interrupt or raise your hand. Otherwise, I want to save the questions to the end if possible. Okay, the eco update is, as I've done in the past. I want to talk about activities related to protection of land, our current status of the wildlife. In this case, as is every year, the focus being the Audubon Society's Christmas bird count and what that's come up with. A lot of work on information on water quality. Some discussion about waste management, which will also relate to the motion, one of the motions coming up, as well as the previous presentation. Some discussion about a lot of activities about energy on the island, and then a quick summary of this year's accomplishments from some work being done by a Vashon group in Indonesia to protect ecosystems there. So, Land Trust has always been very active. This year they've completed the Maury Island Conservation Initiative. It's a partnership between the Land Trust, King County, and the Cascade Land Conservancy. I mentioned this in some detail in last year's presentation. It's amounted to about 1.5 miles of shoreline, marine shoreline protected in Quartermaster Harbor. As well, there's a new shoreline preserve established north of KVI Beach, known as Higher Point. And that was new this year. Also, the Land Trust completed what they're calling their Needle Creek Nick Point Restoration Project. This is something I talked about in some detail last year. Some of you may know, logging in the late 1800s involved this technique called splash damming, where they pull the water back and then release the water in a big rush to help them sluice the logs down the stream. Not surprisingly, this caused a lot of damage. Here's a picture of Abel Eckhart, who's the coordinator for land stewardship at the Land Trust, in front of one of the erosional features caused by these activities, and who has been working very hard to try to protect them. to restore the stream. And what he's been involved with doing, what this project is involved, is activities such as placing large logs in the stream bed, stabilizing the stream bed with these quad logs, these long tubes of fabric stuffed with coconut husks to hold them down, replanting stream banks with native plants, and the removal of a derelict bridge upstream from the Cedarhurst crossing. This was funded by the Community Salmon Fund, which is a cooperation between King County and the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. Also, this is very exciting. The Land Trust, well, it's all very exciting, but this is something that's new. They've completed a shingle mill trail. It's almost 2 miles long. It is now open to the public, and it's really the longest stretch of trail on the island where you really can feel like you're in wilderness. Here's a map of the trail. It ends in Fern Cove, or runs between Fern Cove and its entrance on Southwest 156th Street, and it's well, I understand. I haven't had a chance to walk it myself, but I've heard great things about the trail. These are sort of the numbers for this year. What this is showing, these are data that Tom Dean provided. The percentage of these individual types of ecosystems that are protected either in preserves or conservation easements, showing about with the largest percentage for a given ecosystem being protected for madrone forest. In other words, about 23% of the madrone forest on the island is in preserves or conservation easements. Wetlands and ponds, about 18% of those are protected. The stream riparian, about 5 miles. Shoreline, about 2.6 miles. And so these are the current numbers as of 2009. And as of 2009, the total area protected in these preserves and conservation easements was 1,160 acres, just under 6% of Vashon. Now, my understanding, I'll have to go back and check, but my understanding is this does not include the PBRS, the Public Benefit Rating System, where lands are protected by individual homeowners. Turning now to the Vashon household, as you may know, Vashon household is included in their housing plans. Several different aspects of individual projects that involve land conservation and land stewardship. The Rose Ballon Community Land Trust is just completed, construction of 19 affordable homes completed last year. Rose Ballon development is surrounded by 15 acres of permanently protected open space. The work involved removal of invasive plants and the planting of over 1,000 native trees and shrubs that were planted. Here's a picture of Ben Huston, their maintenance supervisor. In addition, it also includes 4.5 acres of organic farmland. This is land that is leased to local growers who are required to use organic farming methods, and if they sell their produce, they're required to sell it to local buyers. Also, the Vashon household broke ground last year began the Sunflower Community Land Trust. It's their first fully built green project. Here's a schematic of the development. It involves several acres of open space, a natural drainage system, minimal pavement area. These last two items are part of what you may be familiar with as low impact development, or LID development, and they're implementing as much of that as they can for the sunflower project. As I said, the construction began last year. In agriculture, Vashon Island Growers Association, VIGA, continues to be very active in promoting agriculture. The farmers market sales continue to grow. We're up to now, we have 2 different farmers markets, as you know. On their website, they have this map that shows the current locations of all of the Vashon farm stands. As far as I know, those are all organic farms. There's also been a great deal of activity to try to, on part of islanders, to educate themselves and others about how to grow food more sustainably. And one of these activities was the Vashon Island Food Summit back in March that focused on how to grow your own food in a sustainable manner. There's work that Kathy Folt's been very involved with in Mariposa Gardens. She's sort of learning herself and helping the rest of us learn about growing food sustainably. She's been very involved in all kinds of aspects of permaculture and just raising chickens and just all different aspects of agriculture and how to do this in an environmentally sustainable manner. Also, and this was, I think, a presentation that Kathy did, the food power presentation with the Sustainable Practices Committee. They're focused on permaculture and the mobilization of our food supply. That was a presentation back in February. Also, moving on to a project that Dr. Bob Furstenberg, our own very own Vashon's Bob Furstenberg, gave an excellent presentation back in May about this. And the idea is to use rebuilding the soils as a way of sequestering carbon. And he, as I said, he gave an excellent presentation on this. The website where you can download his presentation is given at the bottom. But part of this that involves Vashon is a large-scale planting that they did at the Island Center Forest back in January, where they planted about 1,200 trees in the borrow pit for the landfill as part of this effort to rebuild soils. The idea is to use biosolids, all kinds of biomass from a variety of different sources, to rebuild soils in King County. And this is the kind of environment that they want to look at, is areas where the soil has been damaged and removed, and use this as a way not only to sequester the carbon, but also to help the ecosystems recover from soil loss. Vashon Forest Stewards, again, very, very active year for them as well. Forest stewardship plans were completed for 170 acres of island forest. They're working very closely with the Island Center Forest, with Friends of Island Center Forest, to do a lot of improvements to the forest itself, involving the establishment of several permanent stations for monitoring forest health, extensive removal of invasive plants, a new fence installed, new kiosks, production of signs and maps, interpretive signs and maps, and the planting of the 1,200 trees at the borrow pit that I mentioned earlier. They were involved with that when it happened back in January. Also, they were involved in an experimental pre-commercial thinning project on Maury Island, covering about 10 acres, involving the planting of 2,400 native trees and shrubs. As well, the mill continues to work to churn out tens of thousands of board feet of high-quality, sustainably produced lumber every year. Continuing on with concerns about our land is the Dockton Road seawall restoration project that you may know about. King County has targeted the Dockton Road along Tramp Harbor as a high priority for repair because of the failing seawall. There's a Beachcomber article, this is the link for it, and King County has repeatedly said, the Roads Department has repeatedly said that they're very interested in our input on the variety of different options that they're proposing, ranging from complete repair of the seawall to retiring, closing the road entirely, multiple options. This Thursday, right here, they will be having a public session to get people's input on that project. And more project info, the link is given at the bottom here. This is a minor story that a few of us are interested in here. State fund, we just heard recently that state funding was secured to purchase the Glacier Mine site. And that's a big story, probably perhaps a continuing story, but one that, of course, many islanders are very interested in. Now, moving on from the land to the status of the wildlife, as I said, our most comprehensive annual assessment of wildlife is the Christmas bird count that the Audubon Society on Vashon does in conjunction with the Audubon Societies around the country. The results from the bird count this year were pretty good. They had excellent aerial coverage, they had good weather, and they even were able for the first time to count Blake Island. Somebody kayaked out to Blake Island to bring that into their counting circle. Several records were set, the largest number of species ever seen in the Christmas bird count here. And this included the largest number of owl species ever noted. They went out in the middle of the night with their tape recorders to try to prompt them, and they got the largest number of different species responding ever. The number of individuals seen, however, is lower than the last year's record. The western breed numbers held steady. This is very good news. They've been declining. You may know that based on Dan Wilsey's numbers, it was really the western breed numbers in the Quartermaster Harbor that earned it its designation as an important bird area. So it's encouraging to see that the western breed numbers held steady for this year's count. And moving on to the water, as they've been doing for many years, the Groundwater Protection Committee continues to be very active and busy. One of the things that they did that you may have heard about is they completed their report using groundwater modeling to predict the flow of groundwater on the island and to predict the potential effects of growth and climate change on the water supply. The URL for the report is available online, and there's a Beachcomber editorial on it. They also, last year, began a 4-year study of nitrogen management in Quartermaster Harbor, trying to understand the sources and how we can control or reduce the flow of nitrogen into Quartermaster Harbor. Again, there's a website where you can get the study, and Beachcomber covered it as well. Also, they have been involved with public outreach to property owners in what's known as the Marine Recovery Area about on-site septic systems. The Marine Recovery Area includes the western shore of outer Quartermaster Harbor, as well as 5 locations along the east patches that are adjacent to prohibited or unclassified shellfish harvesting areas. This is an area, a topic that obviously our Septic Solutions Committee is very involved with as well. As was mentioned earlier, there's the Sludge Fest, the Alternative Septic System Vendor Fair, will be happening in Chautauqua on Saturday, May 8th. And again, this information can be obtained online, and there was an article in Beachcomber about it. The Septic Solutions Committee, as I said, is involved with this Marine Recovery Area effort. They're seeking ways to help property owners learn more about the current condition of their systems and to work out approaches for dealing with failing systems. They've obtained, following a community council vote, they obtained funding to support dye tracer studies to determine septic discharge locations. On to waste management. Again, another area of great activity on the island. Back in February, in this room, there was a very successful forum talking about trash that the community council sponsored. And it seems that over the years, of all the topics that are brought up in community council meetings, few topics tend to lead to longer discussions than trash. And so there's a great deal of interest. There's a lot of very valuable information presented at the forum, and it was really useful, I think, by all accounts. This is something we've heard about already tonight, the free recycling of electronics, appliances, and batteries on this Saturday, April 24th. As I said, we already heard about that today. The residential recycling collection event, I just got, and maybe others as well, got the announcement in the mail today, or should be getting it soon. And new items accepted this year, as was mentioned, was styrofoam peanuts and blocks and the mattresses. Complete list of items is available online, as well as additional information. Drug Take Back Day, we just had the presentation today. That's very important in terms of water quality because, as was mentioned, either through this flushing down the toilet or just passage relatively unaltered through the body, most of the drugs that go through that we deal with end up in our waterways. And they are causing considerable problems with feminization of wildlife, not just fish, but also otters and alligators, and it's a very long list of wildlife where they're seeing these feminization effects, but not really sure what's causing them. The drugs may be part of that. Also, something we'll be voting on after this presentation is converting biomass into energy. It's a very exciting proposal for doing this. We'll hear more about it from Bob Comer. And here's a handout that we provided at an earlier meeting, basically talking about turning disposal problems into valuable opportunities for energy and for compost production here on the island. Speaking of energy, again, lots of different activities going on the island. First of all, the Green Power Campaign is underway on the island. Rob Harmon, a fellow islander, works for the Bonneville Environmental Foundation, and this was his brainchild to come up with this for Puget Sound Electric. And the Green Power program is expanding, and several islanders are trying to increase participation on the island. Also, the Backbone Campaign is trying to make Vashon a coal-free zone by 2015 to try to get us change things so that our power is not derived from burning coal. Solar panels have been installed in 2 different sites, buildings in town. First, the Land Trust and the JG Commons building. This is a project from Sustainable Vashon's Solar Initiative. as a sort of way to showcase the feasibility of solar power for all kinds of uses. There's also a new group called Wise Energy on the island that is working hard to try to help islanders weatherize their homes and reduce the energy consumption, or increase their energy efficiency at home. Another study that I hadn't heard that much about, but it was covered in the loop, the McMurray robotics team, is a group of students at McMurray, studied the environmental impacts of being driven to school versus taking the bus. And they, and the loop published this chart of their results. Being driven to school has the impacts that are shown here. I won't go through the numbers, but they have to do with CO2 emitted, amount of gasoline consumed, fuel cost per child, miles driven. And those are the numbers for driving to school. These are the numbers for taking the bus on a per student basis. And by any way you look at it, being driven to school has roughly 10 times the environmental impact of taking the bus. Okay, obviously those numbers can vary depending on the situation, but I think you hear the same story from 4 different perspectives, and it's seems worth paying attention to. Energy also, as I mentioned before, I have these bumper stickers for people who are interested. I know I promised to carry one a long time ago. I'll get that to you, but if folks are interested in this bumper sticker, just let me know. I think I'm going to charge you $1 for each one to recover my costs. I mentioned that I wanted to speak briefly about what's been going on with work by a Vashon group, Alliance for Tomatika Conservation, or ALTO, in Indonesia. I mentioned this before. We're working the island of Sulawesi. This is literally the most biodiverse part of the Earth's surface. It is in the center of an area called the Coral Triangle, which is the most highly biodiverse part of the world's oceans. And the island itself has a very high rate of endemism, meaning it has species that are found nowhere else on Earth. And ALTO is focusing on this part of Sulawesi, the island of Sulawesi, called Mount Tomatika. And as of last year, we announced the purchase of 1,000 hectares, 2,500 acres. And through working with the local governments, we have now increased the size of our forest reserves by a factor of 10. So we now are protecting 25,000 acres of this region. It's an area larger, similar or larger in size relative to Vashon Island. So it's a very large chunk of real estate, and we're working very hard with the locals to patrol this area. The main concern no longer being the nickel mine, because what we've done is we bought the conservation, the development rights for 99 years. So a nickel mine that was going to go in that area will not go in there now, but now what we need to do is to control illegal logging, and that's our challenge. We're now up to 3 brand new species that have been discovered in Tomatika. One frog that we discovered back in 2006. There's a photo of this little guy taken by Islander Steve Caldwell. And now we add to the list 2 geckos that have been discovered as of last year. Another very exciting development is that we now find that the local villagers, after what we call our awareness campaigns, are now enforcing their own laws. And this is a very exciting thing for essentially outsiders to see in their work. And just a story that illustrates this is that a group of villagers in the area noticed that there was a guy over on an island just offshore from their village who had captured 26 live green turtles and was preparing them for market. They paddled out there in their canoe and told him he couldn't do it, and he told them what he thought of their suggestions, since he'd been doing it all of his life. And so they wouldn't take no for an answer. They sent a messenger on a motorbike 3 villages away to track down a policeman who told them, "I love turtle. Why should I bother doing this?" And they said, "Because it's illegal. These are Indonesians doing this." And so they hammered on this policeman long enough that he went out and they managed to save 25 of the 26 turtles were released. So what we see is that the villagers are taking the conservation message to heart, so that they're protecting the turtles even without ALTO's staff, which are Indonesians working for us, or other visitors being present. Okay, on to what I said the main part of this discussion was, which is a 2-part question. How do we, are we interested in fostering green manufacturing on the island? And if so, and also at the same time, what are we going to do with this manufacturing facility? So I want to walk you through our current thinking on this topic. The proposal is to establish an incubator for the development of environmentally friendly manufacturing and other technologies on Vashon, centered on the K2 facility, not exclusively on the facility, but centered on the K2 facility. The original proposed name, there was an article in the Beachcomber. It was originally proposed as the Vashon Ecosystem for Green Industry. We've now changed that. It's now called the Vashon Ecotechnology Incubation Center. So that you don't get confused, because this was in the article. This is what we're now calling it. It's called VMICC. So, as I said, I want to give you an overview of the proposal. I want to state the problem. I want to see, sort of state some of the values that it's a question, not a statement, whether or not we share certain priorities as far as this project is concerned. Ask, well, why should we bother? List some of the suggested design principles, very, very important part of this. A few key criteria that we're using to guide our design. So some suggested components, many, many different activities going on the island that can be part of this, and wonder aloud whether or not this is impossible, a possible dream or an impossible dream. So let's take the problem. What I have a map here is, this is Puget Sound natural areas. That's just for the baseline map. So here's the problem. Along comes in the, I guess, the 70s. It was in the 1970s, along comes this wonderful little ragtag, or not, this manufacturing operation, K2, that became very successful, marketing recreational equipment probably all over the world. Certainly, far enough, and so that in New Jersey, I was well aware of that K2 skis. They were pretty cool, and so they're humming along pretty well, but they have some challenges, and one of them, mostly related to the fact that since they're on an island, their feedstocks have to come from the mainland. That costs money. And then when they finish making the product, they have to be shipped back to the mainland. That costs money. And as a result, largely because of those costs, maybe some other considerations. But those are the things that people tend to cite most often. They got, as my friend Dodi would say, they got WTO'd. They moved their manufacturing operations over to China, in part because of these increased costs of operating on an island. Okay, what can we do about this? Is there anything that we can do such that manufacturing might still be possible on the island without having to fight these kinds of additional costs associated with being on an island? Well, what we can do is, first of all, focus on the feedstocks. Instead of bringing them from the mainland, how about if we use as our feedstock materials that we get here on the island? Namely, a lot of biomass materials, many of which Bob will be talking about. But biomass of various types, horse manure, agricultural wastes, forest slash, et cetera, et cetera. So that we would address that problem. It would be from the island itself. And then the finished products. To the extent that we can make things that islanders actually need, then we wouldn't necessarily have to be spending the money to ship them off island, although perhaps some of them would be going off island. And so what we need to do is, as we approach this, because obviously it's a major, large effort, is to ask whether or not we agree on certain things. And I'm not saying we should, I'm just saying these are important questions for us to address. One of them is, these are suggestions that minimizing the adverse impacts of our community on the Earth's ecosystems is desirable. Preserving economic diversity is desirable. The extreme decline in U.S. manufacturing since the 1960s is probably not a good thing for anyone. A large topic of extensive discussion, but it has been happening since the 60s. We can discuss whether or not we are concerned about the demolition of the K2 facility, a pretty high quality facility that can be used for manufacturing and a lot of other activities. Establishing an environmentally sustainable industrial park on part of the K2 site would be desirable. And these are things that we can be discussing, but they are questions that we need to address if we're going to be moving forward with this kind of a project. So why bother? Well, a critical but underappreciated aspect of true sustainability is the need to be able to manufacture things. The VTIC model that we're working on represents a more sustainable model for industry. And as I said, the K2 facility is a high-quality facility, high capacity, it's very well maintained, and it can serve as a flexible laboratory for the development of products and processes. And it's more easily preserved than replaced. Here's a map. I don't expect you to see the numbers, but it's in your handout. It's also available on, you can download it from the Sustainable Practices site, showing the specifications for this facility. It's got lots of electricity, lots of water capacity. It is a high-quality manufacturing facility that can be used for all sorts of things. And here's sort of just the current thinking for the facility. There's a fitness center, various different components that are being considered, daycare, baby loss. But here is what I'm really focusing on, are these bays here where manufacturing may be possible, where we will be focusing on manufacturing activities for the VMICC project. We got some valuable encouragement on this several years ago. Dr. Polanastis is essentially the father of green chemistry. And he founded the Green Chemistry Institute at EPA. He is now appointed by President Obama as he's now the director of EPA's Office of Research and Development. I sent this proposal to him several years ago, and he said that he's been involved in setting up operations in 27 different countries around the world. And he said that this was one of the most exciting possibilities he had seen in years. You can read the rest of the quote in the handout. But it was very encouraging feedback to get from somebody who has been doing green chemistry essentially his whole career. Another important point is open source input. We would be presenting all the processes and what we're doing on a website, and we would solicit information or input on how we're doing, suggestions for how to improve these processes from anybody around the world who would be interested in providing that input. And I think the Vashon College could serve as a focal point for organizing that information as it came in. And we also want to maximize the transparency and publicity of operations, including concerns about safety and aspects needing improvement. A lot of people are concerned about manufacturing operations because they often involve handling of toxic materials. And if this were unavoidable, certain materials were unavoidable to use materials that have a certain amount of toxicity, we would publicize them, everybody would know about it, they would know when it was coming on the island, complete transparency to engender people's trust in the operation. And here's something that I thought was going to be pretty straightforward, but we want to make this thing fun. Molly Ivins made it clear to us that the only way that a big change can happen is if you enjoy yourself while you're doing it. And so this is pretty important. To the extent that we can enjoy the process, we want to be able to make it fun, and thereby by increasing the participation of people's level of commitment to it. Important point is that the project would support all three legs of the sustainability tripod. Ecological, in terms of minimizing the environmental footprint. Economic, in terms of providing local jobs, obviously very important. We lost many hundreds of jobs with the departure of K2, and we'd like to replace those. And social, there's plans that were on that map that are in the current proposal as well for community activities on site. This is a long list. Obviously, we don't have time. This is why you have your handout. There are a lot of things that are already ongoing on the island that can be part of this operation. And again, in the name of time constraints, I won't go through them. But what I do want to do is to just point out these lists. I've separated things out in terms of the enterprises that are ongoing, things that are in the works, and things that are still sort of in the dreams stage. So these are enterprises that are already existing and ongoing, and the kinds of roles that they could provide. So the bone factory, for instance, could be involved in the manufacturing of parts for items that we're interested in making. The island spring can provide valuable biomass feedstock. Turns out that tofu contains a lot of biochemicals that can be valuable for making other chemicals of considerable value. The dirt yard can be a collection area for biomass. It's self-explanatory. You can go through the list yourself. But it's important to go through these kinds of details to get a sense for how much is already in existence. This is not a dream created from whole cloth. This is a question of, this is really a way of organizing activities that are going on the island that could be coordinated to help foster green manufacturing on the island. So that's why I put these lists together. These are, again, enterprises that are already established. There are several that are in the works. Vashon Biocycle that we'll hear about tonight. Vashon Island Green Tech, the Food Preservation Club. As I mentioned, a lot of recreational activities that would be considered. And then moving into the dream range, revival. The field greenhouses used to be the largest greenhouse complex in the Western Hemisphere. Obviously, there's a lot of work that needs to go into that. This is a long way off dream. But if we could establish greenhouses on that site, it could be a solar power plant, and and we could grow all kinds of biopharmaceuticals if we want. Lots of opportunities for valuable products. Again, emphasis on the valuable part that we could produce from the greenhouses. At least one member of the community is very interested in green building. As you know, the dock and ship, there used to be a large shipyard in Dockton. The VMICC facility could be used for manufacturing parts of boats, sails and machine parts, and forest stewards can provide the wood for boats. Lots of opportunities there. Vashon Supply Network. One of the things that we could be producing that would be of value to the island community would be supplies for emergency preparedness that we might be able to distribute to some of these general stores that are now defunct that might be revived around the island and generate this supply network. So it's a lot of material. Thank you for your patience. If you have questions or comments, we may need to wait until after we make the vote, but I'll be around. But if you want to get involved, as Leslie Brown made clear in the editorial, now is the time. K2 is now actively seeking a buyer for this site. It is not guaranteed that this building will not be demolished. It's a possibility that they may knock it down. They may decide that that's what they want to do. So now is the time for us to get involved, to present some sort of a plan to K2, and we've put together some of these ideas. Obviously, there's more work that needs to be done on them, but this will not happen unless people get involved. Just go through the list, see what's of interest to you, and please get in touch with me, and we'll talk about ways that you can get involved to make this happen. Because if people don't step forward, we may lose this opportunity. And green manufacturing is very important. Question?
Jack, during your presentation, you said a number of times we have produced this wood.
No.
Who is the we?
It's a group of people that have gotten together. Truman O'Brien, bless his soul, has stepped forward. He will be the coordinator for this. But it's a group of people that are talking. It's like like Josh on
Who?
Deck.
Who? The question was who? Not
Who?
a group of people. Who? You know Truman. Who else?
Myself. There's Bob Comer. It's a long list of people. I chose not to list the names here. Step forward and you'll meet them all.
Okay, just when a question's asked like that, please answer.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Other questions? Okay. Thanks for your patience.